now to our opening keynote, and its ongoing global disruption and uncertainty is forcing companies to adapt their supply chains, to rethink their logistics and fast-track their innovation programs like never before. At the same time, the pace of digital transformation itself has only been accelerated by the challenging environment, as once reliable supply chain processes have been thrust back under the microscope. Everything is on the table when it comes to re-examining what future success might look like. So how do companies drive supply chain transformation, navigate these global challenges and deliver for their customers? How do we reimagine the supply chain as a smarter and more agile process with an emphasis on new technology? And how do we incorporate concepts such as real-time visibility, data analytics and unified communications into that mix? Here to tell us more about how his firm is answering these and other questions, please welcome the wonderful Torsten Pilz, CSCO for industrial giant Honeywell. Torsten, great to have you with us here today. Many thanks for joining us.
Hello.
Good to see you. Are you well? You're looking, you're not mid-air at the moment, I take it?
No.
No, okay.
I'm sitting in one of our hubs here in Houston, Texas.
Houston, Texas, a wonderful place to be. Okay, Torsten, many thanks for joining us. It's great to have you with us. We just heard there in the panel about some of the challenges that the supply chain leaders are facing as we look ahead to the rest of 2022 and beyond that. Let's maybe start with a question just to get a sense of what's top of mind for you when it comes to thinking about what's important over the next 12 months. What's kind of keeping you awake at night?
You know, I don't know actually. I think what we all have to accept is that we sometimes don't know what's ahead of us. So I do think our job is just to be prepared. You know, if you had asked me 6 months ago, I would have said, well, I think that the whole pandemic, this seems to be over with most of it, and then 2022 should be an easier year. Now we are in 2022, and it's as challenging as the last 2 years, and I do think that situation will just continue for the next couple of years. So it has a positive aspect to it. You know, every supply chain leader now, and I talk a lot with my peers, they really have all the attention that they in the past never had. You know, I mean, when I was years ago at a party, people would ask me what I do. They would just yawn. And today they ask me if I have a job for their kids. So you know, it's a attention which is helpful, and it actually shows what successful companies need right now. In a world of supply constraints, it's actually they don't need a great sales team. Actually, they need a really great supply chain team, and so that ensures that people get the means and capital and investments they need in order to really prepare for this. So what we do is we just accept that we don't actually know what's going to come down the path in the next couple of months, and but we have very well-oiled mechanisms inside the company to be able to react to it. It's very short term. So, you know, we always hear about connectivity and real-time transparency, and this is all true. We need this, and we need this more than ever. But you also need to have the mechanisms and escalation mechanisms within your company to be able to react to changes in situations. And that has always been true, but it is now has become really a very important part of my daily business, and I'm sure of my colleagues' business as well. I mean, as we have to make priority calls. We have to see where do we need to focus on. I do think that this will just continue in the next couple of weeks, of months, and you know, once the semiconductor problem is over, I'm sure another problem will come up, and we'll have to deal with something else. Supply chains are usually very well built to deal with one thing that is thrown at us, but now you have like 2, 3, 4, 5 issues at the same time, from whether to political tension, trade problems, shortages, you name it. And we are just looking forward to our West Coast ports, where we know that a labor negotiation will happen in the next couple of months, and that usually will cause disruptions as well. So you just have to be agile and flexible, and have a good team that is able to respond to these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I like this idea of embracing the uncertainty, embracing the volatility. That feels to me to be a smart place to start as we look ahead. Torsten, we're going to be touching upon some of these ideas as we go further into this, but also welcome questions from the floor as well. If anything resonates as we're going along here, please do feel free to get involved. Get your questions over for Torsten, and we will bring you up here as soon as possible. Torsten, let's maybe start by I guess getting a sense of what the last couple of years has looked like for you in terms of your supply chain transformation, because as you rightly say, we faced not just the pandemic, but multiple disruptions and multiple uncertainties over that time period. It's placed probably a greater focus than ever before on the need to transform, on the need to become smarter and more agile, more responsive. So how have you embraced that challenge over at Honeywell? What have you been doing to change and transform?
Yeah, I wouldn't say we got lucky, but about 3 years ago, so about a year before the pandemic started, we actually made a decision to really structurally transform our supply chain. And it had a couple of key elements. One of the elements was that we really believed in a streamlined, shorter supply chain. And what the elements were was we started to really rethink, where do we have long, complicated global supply chains, and how can we regionalize them? That's number one. And the other topic associated with that is that we started building regional manufacturing hubs. So and now we probably have more than 80% of what we actually sell in a region, say in Europe, in North America, and Asia, we actually make in this region. So we never really believed in long, complicated supply chains, because they require a high level of synchronization, and they're very prone to high inventory levels, supply problems, all kinds of complications. And at the end of the day, we were right, because when we saw that when the pandemic was going on, we just lost 1 day of production per factory on average. So we didn't really had to shut anything down for a longer period of time, which was really a benefit, and it came from our decision early on to really streamline and simplify our supply chain. The other thing that we had to do is we heavily invested in data and analytics and really a digital supply chain. At the end of the day, supply chain is a broker. We broker information from customers, from suppliers on the one end, and then we broker materials on the other side. And so it's by nature, it is a system that needs to be connected to all kinds of things in the world. And everybody who's in this field knows that. And the more you know about things upstream and downstream of where you are, the better it is, the better you can be prepared, and the better the decisions you can make. And we are now in a time where we actually see that these true end-to-end and very well connected supply chains, they actually can become a reality, because the technology is there. I mean, you have huge data storage capabilities, you have unbelievable data analytics capabilities, and it takes a lot of effort to do this. But at the end of the day, the beauty of this is that you just have to lay the plumbing once. You don't have to redo this all over again. It is one huge IT heavy lift. But once you're done with this, it's a gift that keeps on giving. Well, it's a good thing. And I would say the third one is really had to invest in our people. Supply chain transformation usually fail. They fail, more than 50% fail. They fail because it runs out of steam, management loses interest, other focus, whatever that is. And but one thing is true. If you invest in different skill levels, in a different setup of your people, different capabilities, your chances, the likelihood of success is way, way higher, because you deeply ingrain this into the organization, and it's not only a top-down program. Somebody in the C-suite said we should do this, but it becomes a way an organization works and operates. So your chances of really transforming a company is much higher. So and we did this. We built huge academies, universities, trained people, hired a totally different skill set. I built my own tech team basically in supply chain. So for us, it's super important to think about what do we need from IT, and IT is for us just the architecture. It's just the network and some sort of the technology behind. But really, you have to combine the domain knowledge of supply chain experts with the technology itself. Otherwise, you fight all day long with your IT department, and I just didn't have any patience for that. So you have to build your own tech team basically, and that proved to be super successful.
Yeah, great. I mean, the three kind of key areas there to dig into: this idea of strategy and technology and people, and we'll try and cover elements of all of that as we go into this. Let's maybe start with this idea of strategy. And you say you got lucky by maybe shortening some of those supply chains and focusing more on regional hubs, in-country sourcing, etc. Does that kind of change the way you thought about the supply chain? Maybe we're not so much focused on cost efficiencies and that sort of thing, and actually more focused on these ideas of resiliency. Did different things become important?
That's true. Traditionally, supply chains are cost-optimized supply chains. Most of them. I mean, you look around. Almost all supply chains are cost-optimized supply chains, and this comes from the idea that we have to create lean supply chains. And lean supply chains are theoretically very, very well, but they require that everybody has a PhD in supply chain who is in the supply chain, and that's just not reality. You have to make it stable. It has to kind of be flexible enough that changes thrown at it doesn't disrupt anything. And at Honeywell, the problem that we have is that we have a very, very complex product portfolio. We make earplugs, aircraft engines, we make chemicals, you name it. We run wafer fabs. I have 2 wafer fabs in North America. So it's a very, very complicated and complex and very diverse portfolio. So the idea that is a very streamlined and lean supply chain would work there is just it's not going to work. So I do think we realized that if we want to not only cost optimize, but also optimize our service levels, the cash that we use to operate our supply chain, we have to do it differently. And one thing has really changed. 10 years ago, everybody would just hunt for labor arbitrage, and that's why a lot of supply chains, they ended up in very low-cost countries at some point. But that's not longer a main driver, because you're running out of countries where you want to go, and cost inflation in those countries is way higher than it's in the developed world. So automation is then the way you have to think about how can you combine a good automation strategy with a footprint optimization strategy, and we've done this. We doubled our capital expenditure in automation last year. We do this again this year, and we're going to do this next year again. So over the course of 3-4 years, you basically have a really, really meaningful automation budget, capital budget, and automation technology going on, and that makes it so much easier to run a big, large supply chain. If you have a lot of people involved in supply chain, it's not only a cost factor, it's also you have to have those people. And everybody knows right now we have a labor problem. I mean, we just don't find enough people in certain areas in the world. And the pandemic showed us how difficult it can be to manage a large workforce, actually. So it was a strategic decision for us to really double down on automation, and that doesn't happen overnight. But many things in life are step-by-step improvements, and you don't wake up overnight and everything is perfect. It's not going to happen. But you have to make the right decisions and take the whole team with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect is often the enemy of progress, as my wife keeps telling me. Let's maybe look, if we can, about this idea of technology. You talked there about obviously some of the supply chain expertise that's needed, for that operational piece. Increasingly, supply chain professionals need to be technology savvy, and you talked about some of the technologies that you're implementing. Let's maybe take a look at how technology is helping you identify gaps, drive greater visibility, achieve some of those transformation aims that you were talking about.
We have the way I thought about this, or we as a team thought about this, is, if we hire for many years now, for probably 3 or 4 years, we primarily hire people who are very technology driven, also in supply chain, because we know that the combination, the amalgamation of supply chain and technology, that's the future. And you can see this. I mentioned it earlier that supply chain actually is a broker. And if you think of other brokers like travel agencies, they went away because you can do everything on an app now, because then that technology solves that problem. And so we had to do this. But at the same time, we also looked at our IT budget, and we found out that we spend probably 60-70% of our entire supply chain IT budget in data acquisitions. So when we tried to solve a problem, we had to spend an enormous amount of money and time and resources to find the data in ERP systems, WMS, transport management system, you name it, and auto management systems. And that's just, you can't scale this. You can't do this. Hence, we decided to build our own, we call it a digital operations platform, and it has 3 elements. One is a huge supply chain data hub. It sits on Snowflake. That's the technology that we use, and where it is connected to basically every system that we have. So we are totally agnostic. We run 10 different ERP systems, and is there anything from Oracle to SAP, and we run TMS systems, WMS, everything. I mean, we have a very, very, up until all machine data even, yeah? We have a lot of CNC machines, other machines where we want to have data, and everything is connected with everything. So that becomes an unbelievable treasure trove of things you want to know. Now, when your question comes, and now the problem is, what do you do with this? So we created 2 other parts of it. One is a analytics engine that can actually make sense out of this data, and the other one is an application layer that you need to just use to kind of deal with all of this. And I do think it's at the beginning it's very hard. The business case to do this is extremely hard, because you can't really put a dollar value or a euro value to it, or pound value to this, because you don't really know what kind of problems are you going to solve. So you need to really have the trust of a senior management, and everybody needs to believe in this. And now we see how powerful this is. You see, we have, I'll give you an example. Let's say we have an inflation problem. Everybody knows we have an inflation problem. And our sales teams, they need to know, okay, what kind of inflation do I see in my product? We have 5 million SKUs in the catalog and 3 million different raw materials. And you can imagine how many million bombs this is, and how, if you want to do this and want to calculate this, what's the input cost, what's the output based on this input? It would have been six months, could have $4 million, and it would be a huge problem. This problem was solved within 2 days. Because we had the data infrastructure available. So I do think it's just the beginning. You just have to trust yourself that as a supply chain professional, you will need this. Sooner or later, you will need this. And if you don't build this, somebody will come up around the corner and try to sell you your own data. And we made a decision that we want to control this process, and that we will be the owner of our process and the owner of our data, so we build it ourselves.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff, and I think it's really interesting, this idea of using technology to augment your people resources as well. I think this is an important part of this, and we've heard already about the challenges around the talent shortages. We're starting to get some questions coming through from the audience, so perhaps I'll go to my first audience question now, if we can. And I think first up we've got Vishal over at CHS. Hi there, Vishal.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Great, lovely to have you with us. What's your question for Torsten?
My question is around talent. So I run the planning organization in CHS, which is a $38 billion food company. And as we embrace technology for planning, what I'm observing is there needs to be a shift in talent, the kind of talent you want to bring into the organization. So what I would like to learn is, how do you see the talent requirements in supply chain evolving over the next couple of years? What are some of the big gaps that you see within Honeywell that you're trying to address within supply chain?
I think planning as a function or as a skill set is one of the most important ones in supply chain, because planning is actually the brain of a supply chain. Without that, it's very, very hard to make right decisions or to understand what's going on. And we found that we had huge gaps in planning. Our planners were, and we had hundreds of planners, but they all were what we used to call buyer planners. So they would plan and they would buy stuff, and we ripped this apart. This doesn't work, because you are a bad planner and a bad buyer at the same time if you have this combined. And this comes from an area or years ago when it was a cost-saving activity. You used to have a procurement sourcing department, a planning department, and then somebody had the idea to put this together because a buyer could also plan. But that didn't really work, because they then focus on just the immediate problem that they have. They were basically part chasers. They were not really planners. And so we made a decision to really overhaul our entire planning system. So, what we built was, we called this a global design model. So we re-engineered the entire planning process and the planning system that sits on top of it. So we made a standard for the company. The company has 40 different businesses, probably 8 different business models, from distribution to OEM business to retail, well, you name it, everything. And so we created that system that is actually capable and can be configured in a way that it works with all of these different business models, because your planning system needs to reflect your business model. And we had to hire a completely different, or we had to think about how do we hire different people. And I would say we have a very strong corporate planning team that basically owns the process and systems and technology and everything associated with this. And then we had to rethink how we structure our planning teams that are very close to the individual businesses, because they need to understand what's going on, what's the products, customers, all of these things. And we struck deals with a lot of universities. We have basically a team. To find good planners is problematic, because if you want to be a good planner, you have to have a lot of experience, and you need to be you need to understand how the process works. So you need to be very process driven. And technology is also something that you need to do. And so what we found is that young people we had to basically skill up young people that didn't have that much experience and make them able to do this. And the way we did this is we created basically a team that sits in the corporate team. There's about 25 people. Those are grad students, or they just graduated from university, and they go through an 18-month training program. And after these 18 months, they basically graduate again, or they mature into the different businesses, and we can put them in, because if you have so many different businesses, very difficult to staff them, because you have either too many people or not enough. So we centralized that hiring process, and then we just, wherever we have a need, we kind of push them into certain businesses. And this works very, very well. It works so well that it's so oversubscribed that we actually, in the course of doing this, we had to double the size of the team, because the businesses pulled so many of these people out early in the process already that we just didn't have enough. And so it's a combination of hiring external people, but also you just don't find enough good planners in the market. You have to really train and enable your own team to be good planners.
Thank you.
Yeah, great stuff. Many thanks, Torsten. Thanks for the question, Vishal. Much appreciated. Good to see you this morning. I look forward to hearing a bit more from you over the next couple of days. And we've also got a question on the chat from James over at QuickBase, who can't come up on video, but he does have a question around this idea of IT alignment, how you align with the technology team, how much technology expertise sits within your team versus other areas of the business, what that alignment looks like.
I hope my IT leader is not on, because I always say you got to fire your IT team. It's time to fire IT, but I don't mean it in a bad way. But what I mean is that traditionally, large corporations and most companies, the IT department used to be the computer department. Their job was to make the computers run, right? That's what they did. And then over time, they became like an in-house IT resource. And the problem with this is that they lack the domain knowledge of what you actually need. And then you find yourself every year in budgeting processes where you go through waterlining processes and whatever, and something is above the waterline, something is below, and it's all about how much cost do you save, and if you do this, you will never improve. You will, because it's too slow. It's just once a year, and then the priorities are set, and you can hardly react to what you actually need, and you're constantly in a prioritization battle against other things in the business that has nothing to do with supply chain, and so we decided that we don't want to do this anymore. So we have big programs in our IT department, but we actually have our own, like I said, like tech teams in supply chain, and it's very similar to what Amazon does. They have in their own operation, they have their own software people, and they write their own stuff, and we do some very similar things with very small teams. We do hackathons, we do all kinds of fancy stuff, because that's the way to solve problems. Our job is to solve operational and engineering and production problems. That's what we do, and a supply chain leader needs to have the means to do this. But we work very closely with our IT teams, because they need to make sure that it's secure from a cybersecurity perspective, that the architecture works well with the rest of the company. There are many things that are important to do. So it's I don't want to dismiss this, but I do want to make sure everybody understands that the idea of you can outsource technology to a different department outside of supply chain, I don't subscribe to this anymore.
Yeah, great. Many thanks, Torsten. So we've got another question from our audience here. We've got Brett over at BASF. Hi there, Brett. Great to see you, Brett. Can you hear me okay, Brett? You might be on mute.
Yes.
There we go.
I just need to find the unmute box.
I thought you would have been used to that,
profile.
Brett, after 2 years.
Sorry, you scared me and shocked me. No, I'd just like to ask, I think really from a standpoint, you mentioned a couple 5-10 minutes ago about building IT data structure and investing within the supply chain team, right? How do you how do you ongoingly realize if you're collecting the value out of that from a metric standpoint, from an investment standpoint? Because that's something we're dealing with is changing the location of our investments, and how do we make sure we extract the most value of, I'll call it, digital IT capabilities?
Yeah, it's you can't transform an operation with a business case by business case. At some point, you have to go through that door, and there's no turning back. And you have to say, we will become a digital supply chain now. It is a little bit like the car industry. For a couple of years ago, they said, well, I don't know if this electric car thing will really be taken off, and why would we invest in this? People don't, it's a lot of money, and why would we do this? And look where they are. They just all missed the boat. And I do think in operations it's very similar. At the end of the day, the way we do, I can only tell you how we did this and how we thought about this. The way we thought about this is that we created a program. And the program was over multi-years, 3 years, in multiple phases. I mean, we actually finished phase 1, we're going on now in phase 2, and each of these phases has multiple years. And there are investments associated with this, and I mentioned that we simplified our manufacturing infrastructure, for instance. That's also not very cheap. It's also super expensive to do this. And the other one is we build technology to run this smoother. So you have a bigger chunk that you look at. What is your investment? And then you have on the other end, what do I want to see once I'm through this? And that could mean I want to increase my service level by X%. I want to reduce my cost base by Y. But I would encourage you to not do this on a very discrete, very infinite level, because you will then find 2 projects would make sense and 5 others don't make sense. And it is a very incremental process, and it's going to frustrate the whole team, and it's going to take 25 years to do this. So my approach is, and our approach is, just to put this all together into a big program, align the entire organization. When I mean the entire organization, this is something I review with the CEO and the CFO on a monthly basis. I mean, this is nothing that we just cook by ourselves. And we have a commitment. How much do we want to spend on this? And what's the path? What do we want to see out of this? And as long as this is going well, then we continue. You know, a company has usually 3 different ways to deploy capital. One is in M&A activities. One is in internal CapEx, and I consider this transformation also a CapEx. And one is in share buybacks, for instance. And we made a calculation. We do this every year. What's the biggest return that we have? And you know, if you can calculate the IRR of a share buyback, it's relatively simple to do. The M&A activities, they usually are in the lower double digits, like 12% or something, and our IRR usually on supply chain transformation is more in the 30% to 40% range. So there is a huge desire. I have to do this. So I have a huge project list or program list, and we define what kind of investment do we want to make on an annual basis. And if the business goes well, we invest even more. If the business doesn't go as well, we invest a little bit less. But we keep doing this. During the entire pandemic, we haven't reduced any of these investments into digital or into supply chain transformation, because you can't. I mean, if you do it, you would kill it. Once you start doing this, you have to commit yourself to do this. You know, it's like once you really want to learn to swim, you've got to learn to swim. Otherwise, you drown. And that's something very similar.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Torsten. Be brave, the message for everybody out there. Brett, thanks so much for the question. Look forward to hearing a bit more from you over the course of the next few days. Many thanks. And Torsten, many thanks to you for getting things started today. Brilliant, some inspiring stuff in there, and I look forward to picking up some of those strands as we go through the next couple of days.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Ben.
Yeah, pleasure. Pleasure is all ours. Thank you, Torsten.